Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Kovatz. I am the Executive Director of the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association. And tonight we are in for our first town hall event that we've done since we've launched our virtual training series. So we've got a jam-packed lineup here that we want to get to everyone. But before I bring in our first speaker for this evening, a couple of things I want to just mention ahead of time. One, we're going to have a lot of people on the call tonight and a lot of various different experience within the political realm. So we ask that you be respectful of everyone with their comments. Everyone's going to be muted during the call. So we're going to ask also if you have questions as we're going along, and when we get to the panelist discussion part, please put your questions in the chat and we will get to them as we're going. But be respectful to everyone as we're going along as well. The session tonight's going to last about an hour. So if you need to get up, get a glass of water, stretch your legs, whatever you need to do, that's fine. Just please be present during the time that you're here participating as well. So we've got a lot to get to, so I don't want to waste any more of your time. With that, I will turn it over to IDCCA President Christina Zahorik.
Hi, everyone. As Dan said, I'm Christina Zahorik, the president of the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association, and my pronouns are she and her. Welcome to the IDCCA and the YDI LGBTQ+ virtual town hall. The IDCCA is a grassroots statewide democratic organization that represents 102 counties. We provide a variety of training to our county chairs and to our parties, to candidates, precinct committee people, Democratic leaders, and volunteers as well. And this year, because of COVID, we've moved into the virtual space and have expanded our outreach. Some of the training that we've been able to provide includes more than just campaigning and organizing basics, but we've also been able to include issues and topics, thus tonight's town hall. As Democrats, we are inclusive. We believe in economic and social justice, that everyone should have a seat at the table. We're not perfect, but we're striving to make this a more perfect union. And the discussion tonight is a little more personal for me, as I am the mom, the proud mom of a queer son. So again, thank you for being on tonight, and I'm going to introduce you now to the Young Democrats of Illinois, Ariel. Thank you, Ariel, for coming on tonight and co-sponsoring this important event with us. I also wanted to mention congratulations to you because you're about to graduate, if I'm not mistaken, in less than a month from the I Will training session. So kudos to you on that effort. Ariel?
Thank you, and apologies. I'm in the city of Chicago, so you can hear there's a lot happening around me. Thank you so much, Christina, Dan, Julian, and the team for putting this event together. I also want to make a special thank you to our LGBTQ caucus director, Emily Spangler, for really making this happen tonight. I'm so excited to be here with you all. You know, this training series has been great, and I've been involved in other training series that the County Chairs Association does, specifically the boot camp, and they're always really wonderful. And I know we have an exciting panel ahead, but before we do that, I just wanted to quickly say a couple of things. On the Young Dems of Illinois front, you know, for those of us who may not have interacted with our organization before, we represent young people in the state of Illinois who are Democrats from the age of 16 all the way up to 36. And so we've really this past year done a really great job of expanding our charters. We just held our first fall conference this past weekend. And so if you want to get to know more about us, I really encourage it. ilyoungdems.com is where you can find more information about us, and of course on Facebook as well. And I want to turn it over for the first part of this programming, which will be a training led by Equality Illinois' Mike Ziri. He's the director of public policy there. He's a veteran in legislative affairs and a former Springfield elected official. Mike spearheads an aggressive legislative agenda in Springfield, builds and strengthens relationships with officials and public leaders throughout the state and of course in Washington, and develops these policy initiatives. He also staffs the election-related activities of the Equality Illinois Political Action Committee. He joined the team in 2015, and he's had an incredible career of doing all kinds of things in the state of Illinois, from working with the IEPA to the Department of Natural Resources. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I look forward to seeing all of you at one of our next events.
Great, thank you so much. Young Democrats of Illinois, thanks to Democratic County Chairs Association both organizations that I am very familiar with and very familiar with, especially Dan Kovatz, one of my oldest and best friends from my time in Sangamon County politics. So, and thanks for hosting this event tonight. I have a little PowerPoint, and I have about, I think, 10 to 15 minutes. And to those who know me, that is going to be a challenge. But I want to talk about some of the legal landscape in Illinois when it comes to LGBTQ equality, and then some of the challenges we're seeing as well. So I'm just going to share my screen, and we can start. Yep. So again, Mike Ziri, Public Policy Director at Equality Illinois. When we talk about the LGBTQ community in Illinois, it's helpful to know who we're talking about. And it's about, according to the Movement Advancement Project, it's around 400,000 folks who are LGBTQ call Illinois home. And according to the Movement Advancement Project, I think this is a really important number as we talk about families and what it means to be a family in Illinois and across the country. A quarter of LGBTQ adults in Illinois are, raising children. They're in families with children. I think that's so important when you think about some of the great laws we have here in the state of Illinois. Thanks to, some of the legislators, well, thanks to all of the legislators you will hear tonight, and the way they have championed equality in Illinois and making sure Illinois is the anchor of equality for LGBTQ folks in the Midwest, but also for reproductive health care, for immigrants' rights, for many, many different issues that I think make us, proud to advance justice in the state of Illinois. And as I said, Illinois is what we would consider a high equality state. And, with its legal equality, we were the last state, thanks to Leader Harris, we were the last state to pass marriage equality through the legislative process, 2013. Huge achievement. We, back in 2005, secured non-discrimination protections for both, sexual orientation, but also gender identity, which is so critical, those protections. In 2015, Illinois banned conversion therapy, which is just harmful for LGBTQ youth. In 2017, the law was modernized to keep the process to correct a gender marker on a birth certificate consistent with modern standards of medical care. And then just last year, Illinois passed a very significant law that I was fortunate to work on about whose history and what history is taught in schools. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But as you can see, most states do not have the same level of protections. And you can see from this map, those states around us, don't protect folks when it comes to discrimination who are in restaurants and bars and hotels and housing when it comes to being LGBTQ. So I think that's why it's so important that in Illinois, we should cherish those protections, but also make sure when it comes time to vote and elect folks that we are electing people who will protect and defend those rights. I know there's a lot of attention always focused on the presidential race, but it's also really important who we send to Springfield as well. And as Illinois, as I said, is a high equality state, but there are still many issues to work on. When a couple years ago, when Governor Rauner, the first year I believe he didn't pass a state budget, we put out a press release decrying the fact that there wasn't a state budget, that the governor was impeding the ability to get a budget to fund critical social services. And a reporter called me and said, well, I don't know what programs are in there that affect LGBTQ people, so why are you upset? And that was an opportunity to educate that reporter that LGBTQ people are disproportionately impacted in many ways. One example being employment in workplace non-discrimination. As I mentioned, Illinois does have strong legal protections for non-discrimination in the workplace, but most states do not have state laws. Most states do not have state laws. So before June of this year, an LGBTQ person who lived in Illinois but maybe worked in Kentucky or Missouri would not have the same, workplace civil rights as someone who lived and worked in Illinois. So your employment and your workplace protections were based on your zip code. Now that has changed because the Supreme Court 2 months ago, issued a really important decision ensuring that the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the major federal civil rights law, protects LGBTQ folks from discrimination in the workplace. So ensuring that the protections we have in Illinois are felt across the country. And that's really, really critical, really important. And some of our panelists will see that one of their colleagues is photographed here. She was Representative Gon Gershowitz there, and the photo was in Washington, D.C. to be sworn into the Supreme Court bar on the day these decisions were argued last October. But a really important decision from June with ramifications for areas around healthcare and housing and public accommodations, many other facets of our public lives. Another area we see a lot of tension across the country is what we call licenses to discriminate. And we're really seeing these from Trump administration policies. And these are attempts to roll back or essentially create huge carve-outs in non-discrimination laws by saying someone has a moral belief, a sincerely held moral belief. In fact, the First Amendment does protect the freedom of religion. But, federal law and state law also provides that non-discrimination is a compelling reason for government to ensure protections for LGBTQ folks. But we see these, Tennessee a few years ago passed a piece of legislation allowing mental health counselors to refuse service to LGBTQ people. We see other states, we see Mississippi passing laws like this, South Dakota, and we see the Trump administration attempting to put these licenses to discriminate into into federal policies around healthcare, trying to abolish, non-discrimination protections in the Affordable Care Act, for instance. The Supreme Court has thought about this, but they didn't meaningfully resolve the tension. There was a case a few years ago about the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, about, should a cake baker have to bake a cake? And while many of these public cases focus on cakes and florists, let's be clear, these are also about who doctors have to provide service to, who counselors have to provide service to, who, ambulance drivers, paramedics. There are examples of paramedics refusing to provide care to trans people because they're trans. And the Trump administration would throw open the doors to this kind of discrimination. And we and our allies in the legislature here and our allies in the courts like the ACLU and Lambda Legal, we push back on these situations. Another big one that's really personal for me and some of the work we've done in our partnerships, creating safer schools for LGBTQ youth. Illinois, we have, I said, great protections. The Illinois School Code requires equal access and opportunity for all students, but even in Illinois, 80% of trans people report experiencing mistreatment in K through 12 schools. So there's still a lot of work we can do there. And I will, the legislature has passed strong anti-bullying protections. You see here a photo of the Governor Pritzker, signing an executive order last year about safe and affirming schools. And to that point, the legislature last year passed a pretty significant bill that I think will really go a long way towards, helping make our schools be safer and more affirming places for LGBTQ youth. And it's the LGBTQ Inclusive Curriculum Bill to ensure that LGBTQ youth learn about people like them in history, that they are not alone, that folks like Bayard Rustin and Alan Turing and Jane Addams and Sally Ride, lived, thrived, and made great contributions to society. And there's a lot to be proud of there. And this is important law when you think about, only 24% of LGBTQ youth in Illinois ever learn anything positive about people like themselves in schools. And the flip side of that is 80% of trans students report experiencing some kind of mistreatment in schools, from verbal harassment up to physical assault. So a piece of legislation, a law like this can have, we hope, big impact in how students see themselves, but also in how they're treated by their peers. Another area that we hear a lot of concerns in, and there's a lot of stigma and discrimination, is the fair treatment of LGBTQ people in the criminal justice system. And just a few examples of that, Illinois is one of the states to ban the gay and trans panic defense, which essentially is a criminal defense tactic where you blame the victim for the violence committed against them. Because, oh, I suddenly became aware that that was a trans person or that was a gay person, and I attacked. Illinois says no, and as do 9 other states. But we also see unfair treatment and abuse in our criminal justice system when it comes to transgender individuals in the correctional system, in the prison system, and just the way folks are mistreated, misgendered, harassed, victimized, assaulted. And there's we have our great partners at the ACLU of Illinois who are doing amazing work to hold the criminal justice system accountable to how it treats trans folks. And then something also we must always think of is the violence directed against trans individuals. This is a photo from late 2018 of a rally outside the Chicago Police Department following the murders of 2 different trans women of color who were killed in Chicago, and calling for resources to be devoted to finding their killers. And what we've seen so far in 2020 is that so far in 2020, in the first 7 months of 2020, 28 trans people, mostly trans women of color, have been killed in the United States compared to 26 in all of 2019. So this is something that we all need to be aware of, that we all need to make sure that we are providing opportunities for trans folks to be safe and secure. And that doesn't, that means public safety, but it also means, housing. It means employment. It means access to healthcare, because all of these issues push down on people's lives. And then that leads me to the last area I just want to briefly chat about, is just access to healthcare. And a few years ago, when our CEO, Brian, started Equality Illinois in 2016, he and I did a listening tour. And one of the stops, I didn't go to every stop with him, but one of the ones I did go with him to was Carbondale. And I think I saw Tara from the Rainbow Cafe on this chat also, so that's, she'll remember the story, that the story of how trans youth in Carbondale would tell us that they travel to Howard Brown Health, which is an LGBTQ-oriented health clinic in Chicago, that they would travel to Howard Brown Health to get care that affirms them as a trans person. And we heard it so much that it almost sounded like Howard Brown was opening satellites outside of Chicago. But in fact, what was happening is those youth were driving 300 miles or taking Amtrak 300 miles just for a primary care visit, and then going back to Carbondale. Something that I take for granted with a 20-minute train ride here in the city of Chicago. And that really highlights to me the need to make sure that there's affirming healthcare everywhere in the state. And part of that is making sure that Medicaid provides coverage for all the healthcare related needs of trans individuals. And happy to say that thanks to the leadership of Governor Pritzker and the Department of Healthcare and Human Services, Healthcare and Family Services, and a coalition of advocacy organizations, Illinois is now one of the states that provides the full range of healthcare coverage for trans individuals under Medicaid in the state. And just so important when we talk about access to healthcare. But as with most things, the flip side is the Trump administration is challenging these healthcare and trying to roll back protections that are in the Affordable Care Act and carve out those licenses to discriminate. But happy to say, thanks to champions at the ACLU, Lambda Legal, other great partners, they have been securing victories in the federal courts, stopping the administration from carving discrimination into our healthcare laws. But again, it just goes to show that who we put in office, who we elect matters, which leads me to why election 2020 is important for LGBTQ folks. And it's 4 reasons. One, both in Congress and in the General Assembly in Springfield, it's an opportunity to continue building our pro-equality majorities. The inclusive curriculum law I mentioned earlier, it passed the House with 60 votes. That's the bare minimum needed to pass a bill in the Illinois House. So we have a lot of opportunities in November to add to the pro-equality majorities in the General Assembly and in Congress. Also, redistricting. Redistricting affects elections and policy for the next decade. We've seen many states where right-wing reactionaries, anti-LGBTQ, anti-women's rights reactionaries get elected. Right before redistricting, they redraw the maps, and it changes policies for the next decade. Representation of LGBTQ people in government. There are 11 LGBTQ people running for the Illinois House in Illinois. That's exciting. And there are countless folks running across the country. Just last night, Delaware voters nominated Sarah McBride to be the first transgender state senator in the entire country. And then the last reason why the election is important to LGBTQ people is the fair tax. And the fair tax is important because when we look at, again, disproportionate impact on LGBTQ people, we see that LGBTQ people in the Midwest disproportionately will rely on Medicaid, disproportionately will rely on housing assistance, supplemental nutrition assistance, and other key critical social service programs. And the fair tax is a way to support and shore up those services. It's also a way to ensure equity in the way we tax in Illinois. I will never stop, when I have a presentation talking about why the fair tax is important to LGBTQ people, because it is critical for matters of equity and fairness. And that's just why I think the election is important for LGBTQ people. We're going to hear from some current elected officials and some candidates, soon, and why we need to make sure we send these pro-equality, leaders back to Springfield. But thank you for this opportunity just to chat with you a little bit. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Christina.
Thank you so much, Mike. Just thank you for all the work that you do and that you have done. It does my heart good, and it's inspiring. I also happen to notice on the call there's a lot of candidates that have joined us tonight. So I'm really excited about that as well. Equity and fairness, that's all we're asking. Equity and fairness as Democrats, and almost every issue that we're involved in, that's what we ask for. The next panel that we have up is quite a robust panel. And I'm going to introduce and share some information about these panelists that you're going to hear from tonight. And Majority Leader Greg Harris will then be our moderator as well. But I'm going to start out with State Representative Lamont Robinson. Representative Lamont Robinson was elected to the Illinois House of Representatives in 2018, and he represents the 5th District, which is previously held by Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. He's the first LGBTQ African-American person to serve in the Illinois State Legislature. Representative Robinson is an insurance agent and small business owner in Chicago, and prior to his election to the House of Representatives, he served as the executive director of the Kappa Leadership Institute in Chicago, which is a nonprofit that prepares African-American youth for college. Representative Robinson also sits on the board of Quad Communities Development Corporation, an organization dedicated to improving the quality of life and economic strength of the South Lakefront communities. He's also a member of the Urban League Metro Board and Trinity United Church of Christ Credit Union Board. He's also an adjunct professor at the Harold Washington College and received an MBA from National Louis University with his bachelor's degree from Clark Atlanta University. We also have on the panel MWRD Commissioner Debra Shore. Debra Shore is a native of Chicago, but grew up in Dallas, Texas, and lived for a time in Baltimore, and also in Providence, Rhode Island. And after returning to Chicago, Debra became an active volunteer in local conservation initiatives. This work taught her that the prairies, wetlands, and oak woods are the real discovery zones in our region. She helped launch Chicago Wilderness, a magazine, in 1997, and she soon became a leader in the regional conservation consortium called Chicago Wilderness, an alliance of more than 250 public and private organizations dedicated to protecting nature and enriching life from southeastern Wisconsin to the Indiana Dunes. Although her devotion to the health of local nature areas also led her into the political world and into advocacy, as she discovered that many of the forest preserves had been neglected by those charged with their care. In 2003, she was selected as a participant in the Illinois Women's Institute for Leadership, a program designed to recruit Democratic women in Illinois to run for office. Just like we heard, Ariel just completed her training in that. Debra ran for position on the Board of Commissioners for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago in 2006, and she became the first and began her term in 2006. She was re-elected to a second term in 2012. In addition to her elected position, she's been active in her community, serving as president of the board of the congregation Sukkot Shalom in Wilmette, and on the board and as past chair of the Gay and Lesbian Victory Institute. Debra Shore also serves on the IDCCA Leadership Circle and was awarded the IDCCA Party Builder Award in 2018. On the panel, we also have Seth Wiggins, a candidate for state representative in the 90th District. He's a candidate for the Illinois House, which is currently held by a Republican and encompasses parts of DeKalb, LaSalle, Lee, and Ogle counties. Seth attended Sauk Valley Community College before joining active duty service in the United States Air Force. He served 4 years active duty as an airborne Arabic linguist, and after active duty, Seth continued service in the United States Air Force Reserve. He attended Northern Illinois University to complete his bachelor's degree in political science with an emphasis on public law. Following his undergraduate studies, Seth attended law school at Northern Illinois University College of Law, and while in law school, Seth transferred his service to Wisconsin Air National Guard. After being admitted to the bar, he started his legal career as a criminal prosecutor in Winnebago County, commuting to Rockford, Illinois. He was next employed as an assistant state's attorney in Sterling, Illinois for the Whiteside County State's Attorney's Office before leaving public law for private practice. He's a certified volunteer advocate for survivors of sexual assault, certified through training at the Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling in Rockford, Illinois, and is pursuing a certification to become a volunteer advocate for survivors of domestic violence through the YWCA of Sauk Valley as well. Since 2018, Seth serves as a mayoral appointee on the Dixon City Planning Commission in his hometown of Dixon, Illinois, researching petitions regarding zoning and rezoning within the Dixon city limits. Seth is transsexual and lives with his wife and daughter in Dixon, and he's an alumni of the 2020 IDCCA boot camp. And lastly, about our wonderful majority leader, Greg Harris. And I know these introductions and biographies perhaps are a little long for a Zoom call, but I do think it's important that we understand the depth of knowledge and the just the depth of experience that these folks who are stepping forward, not only tonight, but also to serve us have. So Greg was elected to the Illinois General Assembly in 2006, and he is the majority leader of the House of Representatives. Harris serves as the state representative for the 13th District, which includes parts of Uptown, Ravenswood, Lincoln Square, and North Center, Westridge, and Bowmanville. Harris is the first openly gay person in Illinois to become a member of the legislative leadership. He's chairman of the Rules Committee and serves on the Appropriation, Human Services Committee, and Wages and Rates Subcommittee. He's a member of the Illinois Juvenile Justice Leadership Council and the Joint Legislative Health Insurance Exchange Committee. He serves as chairman on the Violence Prevention Task Force and is a member of the Racial and Ethnic Impact Research Task Force, the Quality of Life Board, the House Task Force on Sexual Discrimination and Harassment as well. Representative Harris has been recognized for service to various Chicago communities by awards from Travelers and Immigrants Aid, Voice of the People, the Uptown Chamber of Commerce, and the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, the Chinese Mutual Aid Society, Ethiopian Community Organization, Korean American Community Services, Asian Human Services, and the NAMES Project, just to name a small few. Majority Leader Harris, the room is yours.
Well, thanks, Christina, and everyone who's here for taking time tonight to learn about the issues that are confronting us as LGBT people and allies, and also what we can do to protect the gains we've already made. And I just want to make one brief comment before we start on with your questions for the panel. But Mike talked about how in Illinois, we have actively gone about the business of protecting not only LGBT rights in state law, but also immigrant and refugee rights, the rights of women to choose. We protected climate change We've protected and expanded the rights to vote. A lot of things that people are treasuring right now, especially given what's going on at the national level. But if you think back just 4 years, people thought a lot of these things were resolved at the national level also. And with one election, all of these things that we had really sort of counted on in our daily lives became undone. And so that's why it's so important not only go out and work and campaign for Joe Biden and Vice President Harris, to be sure you go down the ballot, get your family and friends, the people you go to church or synagogue or mosque with, to go down the ballot, to elect the people in Illinois who are going to protect these things in law that Mike Ziri talked about. Because just like in Washington, D.C., if we get lax and get the wrong people in there, they can disappear virtually overnight also. So that being said, it's really an honor to talk to people tonight who I just admire so much for themselves, putting themselves out in the arena. You have Debra Shore, who I believe is the first open lesbian to win a major electoral victory in Illinois. You have Lamont Robinson, who is the first openly gay African-American man to win a seat in the legislature. And you have Seth Wiggins, who will become the first openly trans person to serve in the Illinois legislature. And there will be a seat open just to the left of me, Seth. So when you win, please sit next to me on the House floor. Be a request. So here's a question from Joseph Newkirk that says, what effort is being made in Illinois to provide citizens that with evidence that sexual orientation is not a conscious choice, but is a largely genetic and cannot be willfully changed? So who would like to start with that question? Lamont, would you like to talk about how you confront that in your community?
Leader, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The question is, how do we go about messaging to citizens that sexual orientation is not a choice, but is in fact genetic, an innate characteristic? How do you talk about that, or if it has come up in your community?
Sure. Great question. That has not come up in my community, but I think that when we are out, particularly on Zoom calls and where we are meeting with constituents, I think that the point of using our pronouns, putting that out there, Leader Harris, into the person's question is extremely important. And so I think that even though it hasn't come up in my community, I think that what we can do is, again, how we move around our districts, using pronouns. I think these things are important for us to make sure that we're welcoming everyone to the table.
Okay, so let me just ask Seth then to comment next.
Sure. So everyone hear me okay? Volume coming in clear? Good there? Okay. So while I haven't actually been asked this personally, what I've done as an advocate just growing up, so my background a little bit, it was mentioned that I'm transgender. So I transitioned 4 years ago, first 29 years of my life as a woman, and being sexually attracted to women. I was a lesbian for, since I came out at 18 about. So I had about a decade experience swimming upstream in that life before I came out here and swam upstream this way. So the way that I think any discussion needs to happen if we're going to make headway is to be as human as possible, to break it down to just a normal level. These aren't big boogeyman issues. They aren't theoretical issues. If we just kind of break down the barriers by making truth and actual lived experience more known and more represented, we start to answer people's questions that aren't even being asked, that they just have in their head, or we answer them with our actions. So, instead of talking about what's genetic, what's not, I'm not a scientist, I break it down like this. Why would one make a choice to be ostracized, right? So when I'm doing this, I don't have a choice in the matter. I'm attracted to women, and that's how I'm going to live my life, because that's how my romantic needs are fulfilled, right? And when you challenge people's views that way and give kind of just an everyday, normal way to look at it, like, come on, that sounds crazy. Why would someone choose this? People are forced to confront that question, and maybe it takes 1, 2, 10, 20 times to think about it, but eventually maybe they wrap around to, okay, yeah, maybe Fox News has this one wrong. Additionally, you know, in representation in the legislature, the importance of taking away or talking out against the vilification of science and data, I think goes a long way in trusting science and education information that's put out there. So instead of people being able to bring maybe a religious quote as an end all be all to the discussion, we can actually weigh it with trusting genetics if there is the information out there, and getting people to have lend credibility again to that.
Okay, Deborah, I mean, you've done many campaigns, you've been active in politics a lot. When this kind of question comes up from audiences to you, how do you typically handle it?
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for including me this evening. Happy to be here. Thanks, everyone, for the work you're doing. The question hasn't come up, frankly, in my being out and about. I give many public presentations, and not infrequently, someone will come up to me and say, thank you for being open about your sexual orientation. I have a son or daughter or relative who is. It's just good to see people who are out and proud. And I think that's important, totally, because we're models, and it's been very valuable. But the first question about how do you educate people, just say, you know, describe your own experience. Your own lived experience, that it's who you are, it's how you feel most yourself, and that it's not a choice.
Okay. Thanks. And I'm just noticing here that the little title block under my picture, it sort of cuts off. So I hope it says my pronouns are he, his, and him. So if it doesn't, that's what they are. And the next question we have from the audience is, what is being done, or what would you like to see done for those who are candidates to better help homeless youth who are LGBT or questioning? Lamont?
Yeah, I think that it would be great, and another great question, that we add that to our agenda items, excuse me. I'll use Seth for an example. And Seth, so happy that you are presenting with us tonight, and looking forward. I don't sit too far from your Harris, and so I'll be able to see you and come over and get your expertise on a lot of different things, because we'll be in close proximity. But to the question, I think it's important that when we look at, we know that in the state of Illinois that we have an issue around housing. We have an issue around our homeless population, but we do need to drill it down to talking about our LGBTQ youth that are in high numbers in the state of Illinois that we're seeing homeless. And it'd be great if not only those of us that are LGBTQ, but those of us that are not can rally behind this huge issue that's plaguing our state. And so to the question, I think it's important not only for candidates like Seth, but those of you that are also looking to be in the General Assembly or looking to be in the City Council or in some of our counties in the state of Illinois to tackle this issue. Because again, these are our kids. And if you're an elected official, we have to be a safety net for our youth. And our youth are really having a difficult time struggling with who they are and their sexuality. And it could be that they could be LGBTQ, or it could be that they're just going through a phase in their life. But at the end of the day, it is upon us to make sure that we protect our youth. And so with that said, I really want to put the onus out to the candidates that are running across the state to make it a priority when we talk about quality housing, we talk about homeless, to really think about our youth. And also knowing that our youth, high numbers of our youth, which is why I passed to give prep to youth in the state of Illinois, is that a lot of our youth are contracting HIV because they are homeless and they have to be able to provide for themselves. And unfortunately, by being able to provide for themselves, they have to do what's called sex work. And so with that said, we know in the state that this is a huge issue. And so we need others, not just folks that are identified as LGBTQ, but we need folks that, again, can rally behind this issue to make sure that it stays at the forefront, because this is a big issue, again, across the entire state. So thank you for the question.
I'll just mention that statistics show that over 42% of homeless youth do identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgendered. So it is a huge cohort of the homeless population. I think Seth had raised his hand to talk on this.
Yeah, in law school, they called me a gunner, which is the person who's always asking the questions. So sorry, guys, if I ruffle any feathers. So two things. I'm going to answer this two ways. We're going to go back to the fair tax. We're going to go back to representation. So us candidates that are on the ballot. Fair tax, if it's not passed, our ability to raise revenue is limited. And if we can't raise revenue, we're going to have to look at cutting programs. Now, every single one of us on the call, every single person in the Democratic Party knows the first on the chopping block are social programs. That's what they're always going to cut, right? At the top of those social programs are these ones that people do not identify as necessary, which are those programs that assist people in the LGBTQ plus community. So passing the fair tax, getting, a good campaign against dis or misinformation will help us in our efforts in November. And being able to have revenue will then be able to fund programs. And I'm not just talking about the programs that are now in effect, but being able to expand upon programs and, importantly, to have information campaigns. So that parent who is fearing the unknown, because for me, transgender, I always give people license to get it wrong a few times or a few tens of times. Because they stop trying if they're turned off because they're so concerned or anxious that they're going to get something wrong. And so in informing people and educating people and allowing them to learn, we provide a society where there is more inclusion, there is more celebration of diversity, and all of a sudden LGBTQ youth aren't kicked out because perhaps we're having generations where people like me are more understood, which brings me to the second point, representation. I have had, I think I counted yesterday after a talk I did for a different LGBTQ Zoom for Equality Illinois, I've had 16 parents since I announced 12 months ago ask me to be a mentor or a big brother for their LGBTQ youth. So just seeing me and saying like, yeah, that's kind of a normal dude. This is someone I'd want to talk to my kid, let them know it's going to be okay. They have opportunities for a normal life. That's huge. Now, if we can get on a bigger platform and represent the district and speak with a bunch of different organizations, I give them a representation of our community that isn't the boogeyman on Fox News. And by doing that, that in itself informs people and reduces the ability of fearing the unknown so much that you kick your kid out. And I think investing in those two ways would reduce problem with homeless youth.
And Debra, I know this is not within your direct bailiwick, but I know with your involvement in so many philanthropic organizations too, what things do you see as being important to helping with issues around homeless youth?
Well, and you touched on it, Greg, it's those organizations that are already doing the work can provide more services to more people if they have more resources. Center on Halstead, Pride Tank with the Tiny Homes program. There are a number of groups that do excellent work, and they always need more in the way of resources. We can help.
So there's a question here that seems pretty much written for Seth so that he does not have to jump up and volunteer. This is, can you talk about what services and challenges in obtaining services there are for the medical needs and both physical and behavioral health needs of persons undergoing transition?
Sure. So briefly, just for context, when I was in law school, I was still a female up until my third and final year of law school. And I actually was a diversity scholar. Part of the scholarship was to host a panel kind of like these in person. And one of the issues came up was HB2 out of, I can't remember if it was North or South Carolina, but where you were supposed to only use the gender specific bathroom that coincides with your gender listed on your birth certificate. And in hosting people and panelists, one of whom was a transgender woman, I learned myself that the cost prohibition on transitioning that I assumed in things not being covered by insurance was actually false. I was actually able to have most of my treatments and surgery covered under my Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance. And just having that information allowed me to then say, okay, but what about the military? Don't want to get kicked out of the military. There's a ban on this. Well, no, Secretary of Defense under Obama, Ash Carter, actually disallowed the ban, before Trump got dramatic with it. But with those two barriers out of the way, I was able to transition. Now, what type of resources are out there? Thankfully, this is a topic right now that's, for better or worse, controversial enough to be a hot topic and have a lot of information on the internet that I was able to access myself. But being able to search that out and be a nerd who goes through and researches for myself is one thing. Being a youth who's looking at transitioning, or someone in their early 20s, 30s, who maybe doesn't have as much know-how where to look stuff up, it would help if we could better inform by making available that information to people. I've heard Howard Brown Health mention that's where I go for my testosterone treatment. I've been going there for almost 4 years now. They operate on a grant, so I'm able to get a lot of my medication at discounted cost, which helps a lot because right now I am full-time campaigning, so I'm without a job, so I don't have insurance through my employment. So it would cost a lot without insurance. So it's great that they have grants and can offer that to folks as needed. As far as getting connected with resources, again, back to fair tax. If we have the revenue, we can invest in resources, we can invest in services, and these are the type of services that we need to turn stuff around.
Okay. So we're going to shift gears here from policy and healthcare to COVID, pandemic, and the economic downturn. So let's start this time with Debra. But the question is, as we look at the impacts of COVID on our state, and then the job loss and workforce issues that have befallen so many people as a result of the pandemic, are there particular pieces of legislation or particular policies that we should think about putting in place that are most helpful to LGBT folks?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure any come to mind right away. One of the concerns, and I don't think we're seeing it being viewed through that filter, has to do with nursing homes, care and attention to nursing home residents, often LGBTQ seniors who are in nursing homes are discriminated against anyway, and this may be an invitation for even more. So training always, and sensitivity and attention on the part of regulators, inspectors, and community members to that would be important.
Lamont, to you.
I would agree with Deb that is a big issue as it relates to housing in the state, not only in nursing homes, but also just being able to get quality housing in the state. If you the laws and if you are, the perception out there is if you are LGBTQ. And so that again is a big issue. And I think that it is something that we have to keep an eye on. I also think that it is the reason why it's so important to have an outfit and a safety net like Equality Illinois that really is the go-to group when issues like this happen in our state. Leader Harris and I, and Seth will learn this, we don't have eyes and ears everywhere. And so we have to lean on organizations like Equality Illinois that bring us issues that we have to investigate and get to the bottom of. And so that's why it's so important that we support organizations like Equality Illinois and we stay very close to them, because again, they're the safety net when issues like this come up. And that we have to be able to investigate and get to the bottom of these issues. But it is something that I think it is an issue. If friends, and I know that I'm speaking to the choir, if our family and friends don't vote in the November election, I know that we're all going to vote, but it's those in our family, it's our friends that might not think that this election is important. And to the question, it is important because of who we have in office right now. And if he stays, we're going to continue to hear these issues come up again if we do not elect a new president.
Seth.
Yeah, what I would add is this: if we can, when we think about what policies are best to assist with our community in the pandemic during COVID, right? And you think about anyone, any person, whether they're in the community or not, their experience during this pandemic, there's a big pitfall with mental health. There's seasonal depression up the wazoo, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of abnormality that makes people uncomfortable. And so if we can think about the everyday person's experience, and then we think about the added layer that someone who's trans and worries about being maybe misgendered or the incorrect use of pronouns, or someone who's in a same-sex relationship who is concerned about maybe being looked at or treated differently when they're in public or at a specific agency. The way that we can start chipping away at those anxieties is by making sure that we support and strengthen policies that require public agencies to give people basic dignity. And if we have more people like us in the legislature, we can ensure that remains the goal.
Okay, thanks. And so here's I think one last question is, how do we bring more LGBT people into the political process? How do we engage them? How do we activate them? And Debra Shore, you were a leader of the Victory Fund for many years. You've spent a good part of your life working on this issue. Let's start with Commissioner Shore.
Well, thank you, Leader Harris. We know for women candidates, they need to be asked. And I suspect the same is true of LGBTQ folks who may be thinking about running for office, or maybe not. If you know someone who's passionate about education, healthcare, veterans care, the environment, housing, whatever it is, if they care about an issue deeply, ask them to run for office, and then help them get the skills and training that will allow them to be a successful candidate. The Victory Institute holds candidate trainings around the country. I went through one once I decided to run. It was enormously helpful. And then seek out any of us who have run or who are in office. I'm happy to sit down or get on the phone and ask questions and talk with anyone who may be considering running or has decided to run. I did it with a young fella named Lamont Robinson a few years ago when he was thinking about running, and I'm so proud of the path he's on. But ask. We need more people who are nurses and architects and teachers in office.
Well, let's go to that young fellow, Representative Robinson. What would you say?
Greg, I first want to say that great question. I want to, of course, thank Deb, because Deb, Commissioner Shore's is 100% correct. She has been a mentor to me and a friend, and we need that. And I think that those of us that are thinking about running for office, that there are members of the LGBTQ community that want to make sure that we have others within the ranks, in the political ranks, which is extremely important. We can't do this work alone. I have been very fortunate to have someone like Leader Harris, Commissioner Shore, and others that have continued to support me and pick up the phone. Leader Harris, I know you remember that I sat down with you, I sat down with Alderman Tom Tunney to just talk about what do I need to watch out for? What are the things, the challenges that I will face as a open member of the LGBT community? And I was very thankful that you guys took the time to sit down with me. And so again, that is to say, even though that we are a very small in number, that we are open to sitting down with folks that are looking for public office. But let me also say that even before you take that leap, getting involved with campaigns, getting involved in Seth's campaign, getting involved with making sure that we have a new president come November. There are opportunities that are out there for you to get involved in campaigns, and we need to have our voices in campaigns across the state. And so that is a great way that not only our voices will be heard, but you get to decide if this is something that you want to do. And then also after the election, I know that in my office, I'm a very short staff, that we're always looking for folks to volunteer and make calls to seniors and walk the district, to work on a newsletter or our social media. There are always opportunities to get involved, whether that be someone running for office or an elected official. And so I put that ask out there to folks that are again, thinking about running for office, particularly in the LGBTQ community. There are a lot of different ways that you can get involved. And separate from that, those of us that know folks that our community and have community involvement, have been doing great work, we should be reaching out to them, as Deb said, and making sure that they consider running for office. Those are the ways that, again, we can move the needle as it relates to the LGBTQ community. We need folks in Congress, and we need folks in the General Assembly and at the city levels, as well as the county levels, to be members of the LGBTQ community. That way that we can move our communities forward. And so, again, as Deb mentioned, please seek us out. We are here to be of assistance to you if you are on the line thinking about running for public office.
And Seth, soon to be Representative Wiggins, can you briefly close us out, because we're coming up against our time deadline, be respectful to people, and those questions we didn't get to in the chat, I think the folks at DCCA are going to be trying to get you some answers. They'll preserve the chat record. So if we didn't get to you, apologies. And Seth.
Sure. So I believe the best answer to this is something that the Democratic Party is already doing great and is known for, and why we attract people to our party is inclusion and empowerment. So just seeing LGBTQ members and empowering them to be themselves, empowering them to be included, and not just included for the vote of the community, but included because we're people and our party gets that. I was asked to run by the previous candidate in the midterm 2018 election, and we're in a 60-40 split Republican-Democrat district. It's historically a 20-point spread. Statistically, I am not likely to win. And so asking me as a transgender man to run nonetheless in a heavily Republican area maybe would be a pitfall by some, by strategists. I was asked anyways. I've gained the support of my party, and it's now, I would say, a flippable district. He just raised $29,000 against me in the last 30 days. And so I'd say someone at least is seeing my campaign as a threat to him. So including us, not being afraid to include us, and encouragement and empowerment goes a long way.
Okay, well.
Is that enough? Normally I'm not good at brevity.
You did great. So I want to thank, the people who are on the panel, Commissioner Debra Shore, Representative Lamont Robinson, and candidate Seth Wiggins, for being with us tonight. Thank people for the very thoughtful questions which continue to roll in. And as I said, we'll be getting answers back to you. But now to begin to wrap up, it's my time to turn this over to the director of the LGBTQ plus caucus of the Young Democrats, Emily Spangler.
Do we have Emily on? I don't hear or see Emily. Is that true?
Then do we turn it back over to Ariel or Christina?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
There
Yes,
you are.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, so sorry. Hi, my phone is on 2% and I'm downtown. I am so sorry. I just wanted to wrap it up really quick. Thank you all so much for participating in this panel. It really means a lot to not only YDI, and, but just the whole queer community as a whole. It is wonderful for young people to learn from various ages in the queer community and how we can be successful, how we can promote our community's visibility, not only politically, but also in activism. So I want to thank everybody briefly, and I will turn it over to who is next.
Thank you, Emily. And thank you for suggesting, reaching out to me and suggesting that we pursue this topic. So thank you for that as well. Again, I mean, I think, as we all know, the election is it's less than 50 days away. We all believe that this is the most election in our lifetimes. For a variety of reasons, not just being the fact that we've got someone in the White House that doesn't really reflect anything, in my opinion, that has to do with being an American, let alone our democratic values. And what I hear tonight is something I think is true, and the Democratic Party believes that gay rights are human rights, and that we need to have everybody visible and everybody at the table. Because if we don't have those perspectives, then those policies that make our lives better don't get enacted. So thank you all tonight for being on the call. IDCCA will be here throughout the election, this cycle and next, to make sure that we are asking those folks to run, as well as making sure that we provide the training that they need to be successful. So thank you. We will see you, I hope, soon. And God bless us in the United States of America. Thanks a lot.